Ooh, ooh, ah, ah, live, land, grow on Penyo channel. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Hello, hi Penyo community, Bafenyi Conquerors. We are more than conquerors. Unleash the power within. It's a feel good now kind of vibe. First timers, awesome. Welcome to Penyo channel. Subscribers and regulars, thank you, grateful, much appreciated. Keep coming and stay. Penyo means victory, for we are victorious. It's a triumphal procession. Today is better than yesterday and tomorrow will be better than today. Book Long Walk to Freedom by Nelson Mandela. Evil prevails when good men sit back and do nothing. But during the times of apartheid, evil was so out of hand that the good was unnoticed. It went from bad to worse. Laws passed one after the other, making life unpleasant or impossible to live. It makes you wonder if no one black was supposed to be around. It was about the color of the skin, from prison to outside. There was nothing else but to fight, and fighting it was, almost up to a civil war. Isolation has a lot to do with self-introspection. Nelson Mandela, he had his mind and his heart and never gave that away. Very bold, well-spoken, good sense of humor, love for himself and his people, well-learned, very open and upfront. He was groomed for this position for a particular section or branch in Transkei, but he decided to do it for the country. He wasn't secretive about the affairs of the people. It's not about you, but there will be a time to keep quiet because you can see that people are not ready. You will talk when they are ready to listen, like when he wanted to start talks with the government. Other leaders in the ANC were saying the government must come first when it has been trying to do so 10 times before. Time was wasted and other small parties were being formed outside prison. People were becoming restless. Then Mr. Mandela decided to reach out for peace talks. It was no longer South Africans. The rest of Africa, America and Britain, China and other countries around the world were all in the struggle of South Africans. He was human, fallible, but did his best and paved the way for others to carry over and perfect where possible. Quote, he realized what so many people fail to comprehend, that the oppressor is also a prisoner of prejudice and narrow-mindedness, and that the same chains bound all South Africans, no matter their skin color. President Bill Clinton. Summary of the book. Quote, the book should be on your must-read list. In a world hungry for heroes and role models, there is one to be found here. Edmond Journal. Quote, a truly wonderful biography, sharp, literate, unpretentious, and as emotionally involving as it is informative. Chicago Tribune. It's an 11-part memoir, consists of a country childhood, Johannesburg, birth of a freedom fighter, the struggle of his life, treason, the Black Pimpernel, Rivonia, Robben Island, the dark years, Robben Island beginning to hope, talking with the enemy and freedom. Born 18 July 1918 at Mvezo in Umtata, his father Gadla Henry Mpakanyiswa was a chief by both blood and custom. One day, one of his father's subjects lodged a complaint against him involving an ox that had strayed from its owner. The magistrate accordingly sent a message ordering Mandela's father to appear before him. His father refused to go. He was asserting his traditional prerogative as a chief and was challenging the authority of the magistrate. The magistrate simply deposed Mandela's father, thus ending the Mandela family chieftainship. When it came to tribal matters, he believed that the magistrate had no legitimate power over him. The magistrate promptly charged him with insubordination. He lost his fortune and his title. They started to struggle as a family. He was given the name Nelson by his teacher, Miss Mdingane, which he never got to know why, but to speculate the reason. When his father died, he moved to Mqekezweni, a royal residence of Chief Jongintaba Dalindyebo, who adopted him and treated him like his own son. He attended school there. Mqekezweni became an adventure. The chores were not tedious. It was a magical kingdom. Everything was delightful. When he was not in school, he was a plowboy, a wagon guide, a shepherd. He rode horses, shot birds with slingshots, and found boys to joust with. Some nights he danced the evening away to the beautiful singing and clapping of Tambo maidens. Religion was a part of the fabric. He attended church every Sunday along with the regent and his wife. The regent had 2 children, Justice, the elderly and only son, and Nomafu, the daughter. At 16, Mandela went to a traditional ceremony, circumcision, was given the name Dalibunga, founder of the Bunga, the traditional ruling body of Transkei. After circumcision, others went to work in the gold mines of the reef. Since he was destined to become a counselor to Sabata, for that he had to be educated. He was sent to Clarkebury Boarding Institute in the district of Engcobo. That's where he met black men who were not intimidated by white men. Mr. Ben Mahlasela, a teacher with a Bachelor of Arts degree, was one. At 19, Mandela joined Justice at Hazeltown Wesleyan College in Fort Hare. Like Clarkebury, Hazeltown was a mission school in the Methodist Church and provided a Christian and liberal education based on an English model. There he met Reverend Mukotimi, who was not intimidated by a white man. Mandela was appointed a prefect. At Hazeltown, she saw himself as a Xhosa first and an African second. In 1960, he went to the University College of Fort Hare in Alice. This was a beacon for African scholars from all over Southern, Central and Eastern Africa. He was studying law in preparation for his future role as counselor to Sabata. He met Oliver Tambo, keen on debate, and did not accept the platitudes that so many of them automatically subscribed to. He first heard about ANC, African National Congress, at the university when he met a member, Nyathi Kongisa. Mandela was nominated to stand for the Student Representative Council, SRC. There were problems around this SRC nomination, and Mandela decided to resign. When the principal, Dr. A.K., a graduate of Eddington University, got to know about this, he spoke to Mandela, asked him to reconsider his decision. Mandela told him he could not reconsider. He asked him to sleep on it. He warned him that he is not allowed to act irresponsibly, and if he insisted on resigning, he would be expelled from Fort Hare. Mandela consulted his friend and mentor, Mr. K.D. Matanzima, a third-year student who felt that Mandela was correct to resign and should not capitulate. When Mandela spoke to Dr. K about still standing on his decision, he was told that since it's year-end, he may return to Fort Hare the following year, provided he joins the SRC. He has all summer to consider this. He left Fort Hare at the end of the year in an unpleasant state of limbo. After passing his exams and returning home, he told the regent what had transpired. Without even hearing the full explanation, he bluntly informed Nelson Mandela to obey the principal's instructions and return to Fort Hare. A few weeks later, after his homecoming, the regent summoned Justice and Mandela to a meeting, stating that he is a grown man, might not be in this world much longer, and before his parting, it is his duty to see that his sons are properly married, and has accordingly arranged unions for both of them. Lobola, the bride price or dowry, was already paid. It was final. They said nothing. The young lady chosen for Mandela was actually in love with Justice, not Mandela. Even though Mandela tried to voice his word concerning the matter by talking to the regent's wife, the queen understood, but the regent could not be dissuaded. He had made up his mind, and he was not going to alter it. Justice and Mandela decided to run to Johannesburg and work on a plan. All Africans were compelled to carry native passes issued by the Native Affairs Department. Failure to do so could mean arrest, trial, a jail sentence, or a fine. A white lady happened to be going to Johannesburg, and a friend of Justice referred them to her. She charged them more than the train ticket price. When they reached Johannesburg, they went to the Crown Mines office, to the chief, Induna, or head man. They got a job, Mandela a mine policeman and Justice a clerical post. Mandela was promised a clerical job in 3 months' time. They were both happy, started to boast about how clever they are and told their friends, whom they knew from home. They explained how they ran away and tricked the regent. Although this one fellow saw his secrecy, he went straight to Induna and revealed their secret. They were called to the office. Chief Jongintaba Dalindyebo was informed. The regent said they must be sent back home at once. They did not go back but went to fetch their suitcases, which when searched, a gun that Mandela inherited from his father was found. When asked about this, he said it was to protect him against gangsters. He was fined for this. He went to stay with his cousin Garlic Mbekeni in George Koch town and told him that he wants to be a lawyer. Days later, Garlic took Mandela to Market Street at an estate agent, introduced him to a man from Transkei, Mr. Walter Sisulu, who ran an estate office that specialized in properties for Africans. Sisulu got Mandela a job as a clerk, working for Lazar Sky, a law firm. He rented a room in Alexander 46th Avenue, then started to complete his BA law degree with UNISA, University of South Africa. At the law firm, he met Go Rhatebe, with whom he shared an office. Go was a prominent member of both the ANC and the Communist Party. He decided later on to resign at the firm because he realized it will do good for South Africa if Mandela became a lawyer. Even though he was not a lawyer, he spoke law to the people, which meant Mandela won't be needed. He resigned and went to start his own estate agency. Mandela was articled. After graduation at Fort Hare, Mandela realized that having a successful career and a comfortable salary were no longer his ultimate goal. He found himself drawn into the world of politics because he was not content with his old beliefs. When he returned to Johannesburg, he enrolled at the University of Witwatersrand for an LLB, a Bachelor of Law degree, the preparatory academic training for a lawyer. Wits opened a new world to Mandela, a world of ideas and political beliefs and debates, a world where people were passionate about politics. He was among white and Indian intellectuals of his own generation. He discovered that his own age firmly aligned with the liberation struggle. They were prepared, despite their relative privilege, to sacrifice themselves for the cause of the oppressed. Walter Sisulu was strong, reasonable, practical and dedicated. Mandela thought to himself that he could be proud to be a member of a party that Walter was in. Then he joined the ANC. He would go to Walter's house in Orlando, where activists and ANC leaders met. It was a warm, welcoming place with Masisulu's cooking. He met the likes of A.P. Mda, Anton Libede, Dr. Prislika Seme, one of the founders of the ANC. He also met Oliver Tambo. They held meetings and then even decided to form the ANC Youth League. They were reaffirming the original concerns, many which had gone by the wayside. They cited the crippling anti-African legislation of the past 40 years, beginning with the 1913 Land Act, which ultimately deprived blacks of 87% of their territory in the land of their birth. The Urban Area Act of 1923, which created teeming African slums, politely called native locations, in order to supply cheap labor to white industry. The Colour Bar of 1926, which banned Africans from practicing skilled trades. The Native Administration Act of 1927, which made the British Crown, rather than the paramount chiefs, the supreme chief over all African areas. And finally, in 1936, the Representative of Native Act, which removed Africans from the common voters' roll in Cape Town, thereby shattering all illusions that white would allow Africans to have control over their own destiny. In the lounge at the Sisulu's home, Mandela met Evelyn Masse, his first wife. She was a quiet, pretty girl from the countryside who did not seem overawed by the comings and goings at the Sisulu. She was then training as a nurse. Sisulu, Walter's mother, and Evelyn's father's mother were sisters. In 1947, Mandela was elected the Executive Committee of the Transvaal ANC and served under C.S. Ramohune. This was his first position in the ANC. He had to be absent from his wife and family during weekends and returned home late in the evening. Africans could not vote. The Dutch Reformed Church, which furnished apartheid with its religious underpinnings by suggesting that Afrikaners were God's chosen people and that blacks were subservient species. In the Afrikaners' worldview, apartheid and the church went hand in hand. The National Party slogan, "Our own people, our own language, our own land." The nationalist government was not even taken to consideration over the English. On election day, the National Party won. The government announced their intention to curb the trade union movement and do away with the limited franchises of the Indian, colored and African people. The Prohibition of Mixed Marriage Act that was introduced in 1949 and was followed in rapid succession by the Immorality Act, making sexual relations between white and non-white illegal. The Population Registration Act labeled all South Africans by race, making color the single most important arbiter of individuals. The Group Areas Act, which is described as the very essence of apartheid, requiring separate urban areas for each racial group. In the past, whites took land by force, but now they secured it by legislation. At the ANC annual conference in Bloemfontein, the organization adopted the League Program of Action, which called for boycotts, strikes, stay-at-homes, passive resistance, protest demonstrations, and other forms of mass action. This was a radical change. Despite protest and criticism, the nationalist response was to tighten the screw of repression. A few weeks later, the government introduced the notorious Suppression of Communism Act, and the ANC called an emergency conference in Johannesburg. The act outlawed the Communist Party of SA and made it a crime, punishable by a maximum of 10 years imprisonment. Apart from the Suppression of Communism Act, two laws passed in 1950 formed the cornerstone of apartheid: the Population Registration Act and the Group Areas Act. The Population Registration Act authorized the government officially to classify all South Africans according to race, divide and rule. The Group Areas Act was the foundation of residential apartheid under its regulations. Each racial group could own land, occupy premises, and trade only in its own separate area. Indians could henceforth live in Indian areas, Africans in African areas, colored in colored areas. If whites wanted the land or house of other groups, they could simply declare the land a white area and take over. The Group Areas Act initiated the era of forced removals, when African communities, towns, and villages in newly designated white urban areas were violently relocated because the nearby white landowners did not want Africans living near them, or simply wanted their land. So Firetown was on top of the list, where people were moved to Meadowlands in Soweto. The Bantu Authorities Act abolished the Native Representative Council. They won an indirect forum of national representation for Africans and replaced it with the hierarchical system of tribal chiefs appointed by the government. Laws stripping people of their rights were inevitably described as laws restoring those rights. The ANC called for non-violent protest for as long as it was effective. There were whites-only facilities such as toilets, railway compartments, waiting rooms, and post office entrances. The government would send spies around the ANC. They noticed a fellow by the name of Makhanda. A number of ANC members teased him that he must be a policeman to salute so well, which later was indeed discovered that he was a police spy. This was generally done for money. Political leaders were banned from attending any meetings or gathering for a certain time. Banning not only confines one physically, it imprisons one's spirit. The ANC started to have underground operations, the M plan, Mandela plan, because he came up with this idea. In August 1952, Mandela opened his own law office. Zubeida Patel was the secretary and Oliver Tambo his business partner. Mandela and Tambo, a small building in Johannesburg Central. The Afrikaner was traditionally hostile to Africans learning English, for English was a foreign tongue to the Afrikaner and the language of emancipation to Africans. In 1953, the Nationalist Party dominated Parliament passed the Bantu Education Act. The act transferred control of African education from the Department of Education to the much loathed Native Affairs Department. Africans did not and would not have any opportunities, therefore, why educate them? In 1955, June 25 and 26, the Congress of the People took place in Kliptown with the Freedom Charter, a mixture of practical goals and poetic language. In South Africa, African artists made the music, but white record companies made the money. Miriam Makeba, Dolly Ratebe, Dorothy Masugu, Togo Shuguma, to name a few, those were the sounds of Radio Bantu. Evelyn and Mandela's first child was born, Madiba Tembegile, nicknamed Tembi, in their new house allocated by the state in Orlando. Their daughter Magaziwe, a girl, was born frail and sickly. She later passed away at 9 months old. Makhato Lewanika, his second son, was named after a son of a petty chief. A daughter, their last born, was given the name Magaziwe after the daughter that they lost 6 years before, in honor of her memory. Evelyn became involved with the Watchtower organization. She encouraged Mandela to serve God as it was above saving the nation. They later divorced. Walter managed to go to China and requested that they should be provided with weapons because it was becoming difficult to fight the struggle with peaceful means. They warned him that an armed struggle was an extremely grave undertaking and questioned whether the liberation movement had matured sufficiently to justify such an endeavor. He came back with encouragement but no guns. Mandela and Winnie got married on June 14, 1958. They were blessed with 2 daughters, Zenani, 4 February 1958, and second daughter was named Zinziswa. In 1957, the ANC Women's League, women all across the country, in rural areas and cities, reacted with fury to the state insistence that they carry passes. The women were courageous, persistent, enthusiastic, indefatigable, and their protest against passes set a standard for anti-government protest. It was never equaled. More than 1,000 women were arrested. The police would come unexpected and raid the suspect's home and make arrests if possible. ANC and PAC were declared illegal organizations under the Suppression of Communism Act. The penalty for furthering the aims of the ANC was imprisonment for up to 10 years. Even non-violent law-abiding protests under the auspices of the ANC were illegal. Prison food had color codes. For breakfast, Africans, Indians, and colored received the same quantities, except Indians and colored received a half teaspoon of sugar, which Africans did not. For supper, the diets were the same, except that Indians and colored received 4 ounces of bread, while Africans received none. The diet for white detainees was far superior to that of Africans. So color conscious were the authorities that even the type of sugar and bread supplied to whites and non-whites differed. White prisoners received white sugar and white bread, while colored and Indian prisoners received brown bread and brown sugar. The state charged political prisoners of treason, but was unable to prove this. Mandela frequently disguised as a chauffeur, a chef, or a garden boy and changed his name, David Motsamai. He would go all over the country unrecognized. The ANC founded a military, MK, Umkhonto Wesizwe, 4 types of violent activities: sabotage, guerrilla warfare, terrorism, and open revolution. Terrorism inevitably reflected poor on those who used it, undermining any public support it might otherwise garner. They were targeting government offices, electric power stations with homemade bombs. The PAC activists had done an excellent job of organizing Sharpville. One early afternoon, a crowd of several thousand surrounded the police station in the area for an anti-pass campaign. The demonstrators were controlled and unarmed. The police force of 75 were greatly outnumbered and panicked. They opened fire to the crowd and continued to shoot as the demonstrators turned and ran in fear. 69 Africans died, most of them shot in the back as they were fleeing. It was a massacre on a front page around the world. Mandela traveled around the continent and London asking for aid with finances and MK soldiers' assistance. He received a 6 months military training but did only 2 months, had to rush back home for ANC work. Lilies leaf farm was a house the ANC bought at Rivonia for the purpose of having a safe house for those underground. It was an old house that needed work and no one lived there. On June 12, 1964, Ahmed Kathrada, Elias Motsoaledi, Walter Sisulu, Andrew Mlangeni, Nelson Mandela, and Raymond Mhlaba were sentenced to life imprisonment for sabotage for what happened at Lilies Leaf. They were taken to Robben Island. Mandela, Walter, Raymond, and Andrew, after over 18 years in Robben Island, were moved to Portsmouth Prison. December 1988, Mandela was taken to Victor Venter until his release in February 1990. The country went into chaos, with political parties such as Umtata Freedom Party and the police fighting in Natal, the Vaal, and Soweto. There were threats of a civil war. In 1993, Mandela won a Nobel Peace Prize jointly with F.W. de Klerk. After much struggle, eventually they had a CODESA 1, CODESA 2 talks on the government of national unity. April 27, 1994 was the election day, resulting in Nelson Mandela being the first president of South Africa under the government of national unity. Thanks for watching. Kindly like, share, comment, and subscribe. Be the light and keep shining. Heart to heart, from my heart to yours, it's all love. La 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 la. Heart to heart, from my heart to yours, it's all love. Thanks for watching Penyo channel. Take care, love, joy, peace, faith, hope. La la la, la 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 la, la la la, la la la.